The dust-filled air of Silverwater, Arizona Territory, 1878, carried the sharp crack of a whip and the desperate cries of a woman that stopped Ranger MacKenzie dead in his tracks. He had ridden into town after months on the trail, seeking nothing more than a hot bath and a warm meal, but fate had other plans on this scorching August afternoon. Rebecca Zanon clutched her 6-year-old daughter Emma to her chest, trying to shield the child's eyes from the spectacle they had become. The lash had torn through her threadbare dress, leaving angry red welts across her back. The loaf of bread she'd stolen lay trampled in the dirt, along with what remained of her dignity. "Thievery ain't tolerated in my establishment," bellowed Horace Grimshaw, the stout baker whose face had turned as red as the Arizona sunset. "5 more lashes and a week in the town jail ought to teach you." Rebecca bit down on her lip until she tasted blood, determined not to cry out again. Emma sobbed quietly against her mother's shoulder, her small body trembling with each crack of the whip in Grimshaw's meaty hand. "That'll be enough of that," came a deep voice that cut through the murmurs of the gathered crowd. Ranger MacKenzie dismounted his dappled gray stallion in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. His dark eyes took in the scene: the woman's torn dress, the hungry child, the smug satisfaction on the baker's face, and the sheriff who stood by doing nothing but watching the spectacle unfold. "This ain't your business, stranger," Sheriff Milton warned, his hand hovering near his holster. "I'm making it my business." Ranger stepped forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. The dust from the trail still clung to his leather vest and the brim of his wide hat, but there was nothing weary about the way he carried himself. "How much for the bread?" Grimshaw lowered the whip, his beady eyes calculating. $2 for the theft, another $3 for the disruption to my business." The crowd murmured at the outrageous sum, nearly a week's wages for most working men, but Ranger didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, counting out 5 silver dollars that he tossed at the baker's feet. "Consider her debt paid," he said, his voice steady but with an edge that made Grimshaw take a step back. Rebecca looked up at her unexpected savior, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. She tried to stand straight despite the pain radiating from her back, maintaining what dignity she could. "I don't need your charity, mister." "It's not charity, madam," Ranger replied, his gaze softening as it met hers. "It's common decency, something in short supply around here, it seems." He turned back to Grimshaw. "Now I'll take 2 fresh loaves, a pound of cheese, and whatever meat you've got that's fit to eat." Grimshaw hesitated, then hurried back into his shop when Ranger's hand moved casually toward his holster. The crowd began to disperse, the entertainment over, though many threw sympathetic glances toward Rebecca and her daughter. "You and your little one look like you could use a proper meal," Ranger said, his voice low enough that only Rebecca could hear. "There's a decent eating house down the street. Would you allow me to escort you there?" Rebecca hesitated. Pride warred with hunger, not for herself but for Emma, who hadn't eaten anything but a few scraps in 2 days. "Why would you help strangers?" "Because my ma raised me right," he answered simply, "and because nobody deserves a whipping for trying to feed a hungry child." Emma peeked out from her mother's skirts, her eyes the same striking blue as her mother's, studying the tall stranger warily. "What's your name, mister?" Rebecca asked, still not moving. "Ranger MacKenzie," he replied, tipping his hat slightly. "Most folks just call me Ranger." "I'm Rebecca Zanon." "This is my daughter, Emma." She straightened her shoulders despite the pain. "Thank you for your intervention, Mr. MacKenzie, but we'll be fine on our own." Grimshaw returned with the food wrapped in brown paper. Ranger took it with a nod that was more threat than thanks, then turned back to Rebecca. "Madam, I don't doubt you can manage on your own. You strike me as the type who's been doing just that for some time." His voice was gentle but firm. "But those welts need tending and the little one needs feeding. Just one meal and then you can be on your way if that's what you choose." Emma tugged at her mother's torn dress. "Mama, I'm hungry," she whispered, though loud enough for Ranger to hear. Rebecca's resolve wavered. She looked down at her daughter's pleading face, then back at the kind stranger whose eyes held no pity, only respect. "1 meal," she agreed finally, "and I'll pay you back every cent." "We can discuss that after you've eaten," Ranger said, offering his arm to steady her. He noticed her wince as she moved. And after we've had those wounds looked at. The eating house was mercifully quiet at this time of day, situated between the lunch and dinner rushes. Ranger chose a corner table that gave them privacy while allowing him a clear view of both the entrance and the street, outside a habit from years on the trail. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took one look at Rebecca's condition and returned moments later with a basin of clean water and some strips of cloth. "For your back, dear," she said softly. "The washroom's through there if you'd like some privacy." Rebecca nodded gratefully and took Emma's hand. "We'll be right back," she told Ranger. Still wary despite his kindness, when they returned, Rebecca's face was freshly washed and she'd managed to clean her wounds as best she could. Emma's face was clean too, though nothing could be done about their dusty, worn clothing. Ranger had ordered a feast by their standards: beefsteak, potatoes, fresh bread, and tall glasses of milk for both Rebecca and Emma. He himself had only coffee, watching with satisfaction as they tried to eat slowly but couldn't help falling upon the food with the desperation of the truly hungry. "Where are you folks headed?" he asked after they'd taken the edge off their hunger. Rebecca hesitated before answering. "West. California, eventually. I've heard there are opportunities there." She cut another small piece of steak for Emma. "My husband died 2 years ago, consumption. We lost the farm back in Missouri and there wasn't anything left for us there." Ranger nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a long way to California from here. Dangerous journey for a woman and child alone." "We've made it this far," Rebecca said with quiet dignity. "That you have." Ranger's voice held genuine admiration. "How'd you end up in Silverwater?" "The wagon train we were traveling with was attacked by bandits 3 days back. They took everything our supplies." Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "We were lucky to escape with our lives. We've been walking since, hoping to find work in town." Ranger's jaw tightened. "These bandits, did they have a leader with a scar across his cheek?" Rebecca's eyes widened. "Yes, how did you know?" "The Redmond gang. I've been tracking them for months." His hand unconsciously moved to the badge partially hidden beneath his vest. "I'm a U.S. Marshal, madam. Bringing in those men is why I'm in these parts." Emma, who had been quietly devouring her food, looked up at Ranger with new interest. "You're going to catch the bad men who took our things?" Ranger smiled at the child, his weathered face softening. "That's right, little lady. That's exactly what I aim to do." Rebecca studied him with new understanding. "So you're not just passing through?" "No, madam." He took a sip of his coffee. "I'll be in Silverwater for a few days at least, gathering information. The gang was last seen heading toward the mountains north of here." Emma yawned, the combination of a full stomach and the day's stress catching up with her. Rebecca stroked her daughter's hair, her own exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. "You need a place to stay," Ranger observed. It wasn't a question. "We'll manage," Rebecca replied automatically. "Mrs. Zanon," Ranger leaned forward slightly, his voice low and serious. "There's a decent boarding house down the street. The woman who runs it, Mrs. Foster, is a friend. She could use help with cleaning and cooking, and I suspect you could use a safe place to sleep and honest work while you reconsider your plans." "I don't need to reconsider, with respect, madam. California's still hundreds of miles away, and the terrain gets worse from here. The Redmond gang is between you and your destination, not to mention Apache territory and the desert." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I'm not suggesting you give up your plans, just that perhaps taking some time to rest, earn a little money, and let those wounds heal might be prudent." Rebecca wanted to argue, to insist they'd be fine, but the logic of his words was undeniable. She was exhausted, injured, and without a penny to her name. Emma needed stability, even if just for a short while. "I suppose a few days' work wouldn't hurt," she conceded. "If this Mrs. Foster is truly in need of help." "She is." Ranger stood, leaving money on the table for their meal. "Let's go see her now. You look about dead on your feet and the little one's already half asleep." Mrs. Foster turned out to be a plump, cheerful widow in her 50s whose eyes lit up at the prospect of help with her growing business. She took one look at Rebecca and Emma and ushered them inside, clucking sympathetically over Rebecca's injuries and Emma's tired little face. "Any friend of Ranger's is welcome here," she assured them, showing them to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "And I've been needing an extra pair of hands, something fierce. The miners from the new strike up north have been flooding in, and I can't keep up with the washing and cooking by myself anymore." Rebecca looked around the simple room with its two narrow beds and clean linens, fighting back unexpected tears. After weeks on the trail and days of sleeping rough, it looked like paradise. "Thank you," she managed. "We'll work hard, I promise." "I know you will, dear." Mrs. Foster patted her hand. "Now get some rest. We'll talk about duties in the morning." After Mrs. Foster left, Ranger lingered at the doorway. "I'll be staying at the hotel across the street if you need anything," he said. "I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." Rebecca nodded, suddenly shy. "Thank you, Mr. MacKenzie, for everything." "Ranger," he corrected gently. "Just Ranger." He tipped his hat and turned to go, but Emma's small voice stopped him. "Are you a real ranger, like the Texas Rangers in Mama's stories?" she asked sleepily from where she sat on the edge of the bed. He smiled. "Something like that, little one. Now get some sleep." As promised, Ranger returned the next day, and the day after that. Each visit had a practical excuse, bringing Rebecca's torn dress back from the seamstress he'd paid to mend it, checking if they needed anything from the general store, updating Rebecca on his search for the Redmond gang. But it soon became clear to both of them that these were just pretexts. Rebecca flourished at Mrs. Foster's, her natural efficiency and cooking skills making her invaluable. The boarding house guests, mostly miners and cowboys passing through, treated her with respect after word spread that she was under Marshal MacKenzie's protection. Emma, too, became a favorite, her cheerful presence and helpful nature endearing her to everyone. A week turned into 2, then a month. Rebecca's plans to continue west became more theoretical than practical. Each day she told herself they would leave soon, but each day she found another reason to stay: the steady work, Emma's happiness, the safety of Silverwater, which had initially seemed so hostile but now felt almost like home. And then there was Ranger. He'd been gone for 10 days, tracking the Redmond gang into the mountains with a posse from the neighboring county. Rebecca told herself the hollow feeling in her chest was just concern for a friend, nothing more. But when she spotted him riding down the main street, dusty and unshaven but very much alive, the surge of relief and joy that flooded through her was undeniable. "You're back," she said when he appeared at the boarding house door that evening, freshly bathed and wearing a clean shirt. "I said I would be." His eyes searched her face, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Did you doubt me?" "No," she admitted. "I never did." That night after Emma was asleep, they sat on the boarding house porch swing, the autumn air crisp around them. Ranger told her about capturing 3 members of the Redmond gang, though the leader and 2 others had escaped. "I found this among their things," he said, pulling a small silver locket from his pocket. "Thought it might be yours." Rebecca gasped, taking the locket with trembling hands. Inside was a tiny portrait of her late husband. "I thought it was gone forever," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Thank you." Ranger watched her face in the lantern light. "Tell me about him," he said quietly, so she did. She told him about Rebecca Zanon, the kind schoolteacher who had swept her off her feet, their happy years together, his long illness, and how she had nursed him until the end. As she spoke, she realized the sharp pain of grief had softened into something bittersweet, a cherished memory rather than an open wound. "He sounds like a good man," Ranger said when she finished. "Emma has his eyes." "Yes," Rebecca smiled, tucking the locket into her pocket. "But she has my stubborn chin." "I've noticed," Ranger chuckled. Then more seriously, "You're still planning to go to California?" Rebecca hesitated. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Emma's happy here. She's even started school." She looked out at the quiet street. "And I've found some peace here that I wasn't expecting." "I'm glad," Ranger said softly. After a moment he added, "I've been offered a permanent position as sheriff here. The town council asked me yesterday. Milton's retiring." Rebecca turned to him, surprised. "Are you going to take it?" "I'm considering it." His eyes met hers. "I've been on the trail a long time, Rebecca, maybe too long. The idea of putting down roots somewhere, it's starting to appeal to me." The way he looked at her made her heart quicken. "Silverwater seems like a good place for roots," she said carefully. "It does now." His hand found hers on the swing between them. "It didn't when I first rode in." They sat in companionable silence for a while, hands joined, watching the stars appear in the clear desert sky. As autumn deepened into winter, Silverwater experienced one of the coldest seasons in memory. Snow blanketed the desert town, transforming the dusty streets into something almost magical. Emma, who had never seen snow before, was delighted, spending hours building snowmen with the other children while Rebecca watched from the window, smiling at her daughter's joy. Ranger, now officially Sheriff MacKenzie, had settled into his new role with an ease that surprised even him. The town that had seemed so unwelcoming when he first arrived now felt like home, largely due to the woman and child who had unexpectedly captured his heart. It was 2 days before Christmas, when he finally found the courage to speak what had been in his heart for months. They were decorating the small fir tree he had hauled down from the mountains, Emma chattering excitedly about the presents she hoped Santa might bring. "Emma, why don't you go help Mrs. Foster with the gingerbread?" Rebecca suggested, noticing how Ranger kept glancing at her with something unspoken in his eyes. When the child had scampered off, Ranger took Rebecca's hands in his. "I've been thinking about something for a while now," he began. "That sounds serious," she teased, though her heart was pounding. "It is." He took a deep breath. "Rebecca, when I rode into Silverwater that day and saw you standing there so brave despite everything, something changed in me. I'd been wandering so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to want to stay somewhere." Rebecca's eyes softened. "Ranger, please let me finish before I lose my nerve," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "I know you came here with plans to go west to start over in California, and if that's still what you want, I'll understand, but I'm hoping maybe your plans have changed." "Because mine certainly have." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm not a wealthy man, and being sheriff of a small town won't make me one. But I can promise you and Emma a home, protection, and a heart that's been yours since the moment you looked at me with those blue eyes full of defiance even when you were down." Rebecca's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire stone. "Ranger. I love you, Rebecca Zanon, and I love that little girl like she was my own." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "You know Emma comes with me, always. I wouldn't have it any other way." His smile was tender. "She's part of the package, and a wonderful part at that." Rebecca looked at the ring, then back at the man before her, strong yet gentle, brave yet kind, the man who had saved them in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The joy that lit his face was like the sunrise breaking over the desert. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close, his kiss a promise of all the days to come. They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in Silverwater's small church. Emma, radiant in a new dress, stood proudly beside her mother, clutching a small posy of winter flowers. The entire town turned out for the celebration, even Horace Grimshaw, who had become considerably more charitable since Sheriff MacKenzie took office. That spring, Ranger built them a proper house at the edge of town, with a view of both the mountains and the desert stretching toward California. Rebecca planted a garden, something she hadn't had since Missouri, and Emma got the puppy she'd been asking for since Christmas. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Rebecca would think about the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. How hunger and desperation had driven her to steal that loaf of bread. How the public humiliation that followed had been the lowest moment of her life. And how, in that moment of despair, a dust-covered stranger had stepped forward and changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Ranger asked one such evening, his arm around her shoulders as Emma played with the puppy in the yard. "About how sometimes the worst day of your life can lead to the best," she answered, leaning into his embrace. "If I hadn't stolen that bread, I'd like to think we would have found each other anyway," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Some things are just meant to be." In July, when the desert bloomed with unexpected color after the summer rains, Rebecca confirmed what she had suspected for weeks: they were expecting a child. Ranger's joy was boundless, matched only by Emma's excitement at the prospect of becoming a big sister. "A boy or a girl?" Emma asked, her hand gentle on her mother's still flat stomach. "We won't know until the baby arrives," Rebecca explained. But either way, you'll be the best big sister anyone could ask for. If it's a boy, can we name him after Papa? Emma asked, surprising both adults. She rarely spoke of her father, though she treasured the stories Rebecca told her. Ranger knelt beside her. I think that's a fine idea, sweetheart. Your papa was a good man, and it would be an honor to name our son after him. Emma threw her arms around his neck. And if it's a girl, we can name her after your mama because she raised you right. Ranger's eyes met Rebecca's over Emma's head, both of them moved by the child's thoughtfulness. That sounds perfect, he agreed. The baby, Richard Robert MacKenzie, was born as winter once again blanketed Silverwater in white. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the start, Emma was his devoted protector and playmate. Life wasn't always easy. There were still outlaws to deal with, droughts that threatened the town's survival, and the everyday challenges of frontier life. But through it all, Ranger and Rebecca faced each day together, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. 5 years to the day after Ranger had first intervened on that dusty street, they stood together outside the bakery that had once been Grimshaw's, but was now theirs purchased when the old baker decided to retire to California, of all places. Zanon Family Bakery, Rebecca read the freshly painted sign with pride. I never imagined I'd end up baking bread instead of stealing it. Ranger pulled her close. Life has a way of surprising us. He nodded toward Emma, now 11, showing her little brother how to knead dough through the window. But I'd say we got the best surprises of all. Rebecca stood on tiptoe to kiss him there in the street where their story had begun. The very best, she agreed. And as they walked hand in hand into the bakery to join their children, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that the desperate woman she had once been whipped in the street for stealing a loaf of bread would scarcely recognize the life she now led. A life full of love, security, and the kind of happiness she had once thought existed only in fairy tales. All because a dusty cowboy with a badge and a conscience had decided to ride into Silverwater on a hot August afternoon and make someone else's trouble his own.